Starfield is widely renowned for its vast emptiness and unfulfilled promises of grandeur, a false bill of goods from the renowned game company Bethesda, sold to thousands across the world. But is this game simply a victim of players rushing to the next waypoint? Perhaps there's a latent depth to this game's visual storytelling and design. So I ask, what happens when you play Starfield without a HUD? To start, I'll say that walking does not feel great in this game. Despite many of the points of interest only being around 10 minutes away from any other given location, each stroll ends up feeling like an eternity. This is compounded when most planets you visit are largely rocky and empty, short of some local flora and fauna. There's very little to ponder or think about. The game could raise questions as to the whats, whys, and hows of this world, but chooses not to. An example of this is the tutorial planet you go to after the introductory sequence. Like many other planets you visit, it's rocky in its geography. It has geysers that spout out gas, and rock formations that have the look and aesthetic of coral. To top it off, there are also some life forms on this planet that look like arthropods and crustaceans. It leaves the inference that this planet was once largely aquatic, though is now something different. This may leave you thinking that these celestial bodies are crafted with intent. This could have been true until I saw the same exact creature on a desert planet in a completely different solar system. This planet also happened to have completely different flora, terrain, and weather, meaning not only are these guys super adaptable, but interstellar travelers to boot. You gotta respect their ambition. Jokes aside, this frankly ruins the idea that these different worlds have truly alien life. Life not only different from ours, but life that's believably suited to where it lives. It's basic world building to have different places have different organisms, all fitting a specific niche for their environment. Seeing these arthropod crustacean creatures in two wildly different habitats in different systems really hampers a selling point of this game's appeal. There are inside look videos detailing how the game commends itself for the detail-oriented worlds, and how they've aimed to have subtle storytelling through exploration. This is like saying you and your friend will have different experiences at the same coffee shop. You may get different orders, you may interact with different baristas, but all that leads to the same ending. You get your coffee. Therefore, I have to disagree with the idea of this being a truly bespoke adventure, especially when you consider in my roughly 20 or so hours in the game, I've found little to no care given to much of the outside or inside environments. I will grant, this is an exception in areas that don't use procedural generation and were handcrafted by Bethesda. These areas are a touch better, but the depth only goes skin deep. I say this as the unique cities lack any real details that differentiate them from one another, outside of general aesthetic. These cosmetic differences amount to what the buildings are made of and what clothes some of the citizens wear. You could argue that some of what the vendors sell or the local factions could be considered unique as well, though that isn't real depth. None of these places seem to have a real history, or at least one that shows from how they operate. It doesn't help that these areas don't have local dialects or accents either, which would be expected of an area that has history. As previously stated, many of the citizens of these places wear very generic clothes that you see across the galaxy. Everyone wearing pants or a jumpsuit all the time doesn't make much sense. Our clothes are a facet of how we live, and everyone living roughly the same doesn't make the world or universe feel alive. This is worsened as you walk through different locations. These areas are rather large, and walking across town actually takes quite a while. It really gives you time to absorb in the lack of care given to these areas. It doesn't take long to realize that these places are designed like theme parks. The facade of a restaurant, an inn, a store, all packed with the clutter in between them to fill the space. All these wide open spaces are pretty to look at, but only while you're on the way to the next location, never on their own merits. In fact, the longer you look, the more you begin to question. Upon finishing the tutorial and walking around the first city you encounter, New Atlantis, I decided to stroll around to take in the view. I was met with the grandiose scale of this astro-metropolis, with hardly anybody to be seen. The characters that were around simply stood idly in the thoroughfares, sidewalks, or plazas that littered the city. The only other people walking seemed to be cops of sorts. In stores, it was much of the same story. One or two husks loafing around, or sometimes there were none to be seen at all. There was only one location where there were people sitting and dining, which also happened to be where a specific character had a quest for me to fetch him some beans. The emptiness of the city really leaves you wanting. Unfortunately, this only gets worse when you look up. The buildings that tower over New Atlantis are initially very fitting for the futuristic setting. Angular, star colors with somewhat odd geometry. Though the more you observe them, you find that they don't have windows, balconies, or any other structural feature that denotes that humans use them. The only alien addendums to these buildings is random blocks stapled to the side of them with no apparent purpose. All of this to say, Starfield severely lacks when it comes to engaging and immersive world building. And building, as it would turn out. For me, this is a huge strike against the game. In promotional material, it was shown to be a highly enriching world that you could get lost in. Instead, I could only play in short intervals because of how mind-numbingly vacant everything was. And unfortunately, this only gets worse when you consider the combat. I wish I could praise this game's attempt at high-octane space battles, though the fact is the tension simply isn't there. I played a close-quarters melee character, and it wasn't only dull, but formulaic. Even though I play without a HUD and should easily feel overwhelmed as I'm not shown enemy locations, the AI in this game doesn't attempt to flank, blitz, or even particularly focus on the player. The design choice seems to be, if the enemies do enough damage, that's challenge enough, which regrettably doesn't work. The only other aspect I can touch on relating to the HUD is the various elements that can affect you. The notable ones I've encountered were frostbite and radiation. As it turns out, you get minimal cues for these. Quite often I found whenever I opened my inventory that I had contracted frostbite or been heavily irradiated, and I had been none the wiser. The audio prompts you do get seem to happen once, maybe twice, then it's left for the HUD to show. All in all, this is another strike for the game. If you can't tell what's happening without the game holding your hand, it isn't designed well enough. Finally, does the universe feel alive? No. As much as I'd love to leave it here, there are big gripes I have to address. Apart from the lackluster city, planet, and combat designs, the overall sense that this is a living, breathing universe with history isn't there. There are also aspects of the game that simply aren't believable either. The first is New Atlantis once more, the hyper-developed HUD for trade that you're immediately introduced to. Not only are the people there empty, but the idea of this interstellar trade port is equally as hollow. Despite having substantially sized landing pads, the only starship that ever lands on it is yours. Only in the sky can you see ships occasionally land out of view, in a section of the city you never see. The problem of energy is also raised. There are no generators, solar panels, turbines, nuclear plants, or even a fictional reason that everything is powered here. The lack of employees, shoppers, law enforcement, criminals, and politicians all make the city feel incredibly unremarkable and poorly crafted. Another aspect that feels underdeveloped is how the combat impacts your spacesuit. As most combat takes place in areas where there isn't a breathable atmosphere, you need to wear a spacesuit to not succumb to environmental factors. You'd also think, to some extent, getting shot would hinder the suit's ability to protect you. It doesn't. It wouldn't be difficult to remedy this either. Have an item that mends the wear your suit's taken. This already exists for the ship combat. You repair your ship with an item simply called ship parts. Finally, and the most egregious in terms of world building and immersion, is how this game portrays Earth. Our home, the cradle of humankind, reduced to this. The reason Earth became desolate is due to the magnetosphere collapsing. A magnetosphere, in short, is the bubble around Earth that protects us from solar winds and radiation, and it's true to life. It exists and is created from the flow of molten magnetic material within the Earth's core. But through the development of grav drives, the game's narrative device for interstellar travel, Earth's magnetosphere was destroyed, leaving it vulnerable to the sun's harsh rays. This caused a hasty evacuation of Earth's population to the stars, where they'd settle on other planets. It's supposed to serve as a cautionary tale of the effects that technology can have on our planet. We are supposed to feel sad because of what was and what could have been, though this game seems to forget a couple of large discrepancies. Firstly, it was established that places without magnetospheres can still be inhabited. Our planetary neighbor, Mars, is one such planet within the game that has settlements and human life. It's incredibly unbelievable that Earth, the Earth, wouldn't become a hotspot destination for tourists or turn into some sort of retreat. The game could have done something very interesting with caves, having cave cities that farm plants and animals that don't require access to the surface. Again, we know these places can still be settled upon even without a magnetosphere. It seems like a wasted opportunity to not do something with that. There's also no explanation as to where all the water went. Magnetospheres don't dictate how much water is retained on a planet's surface. That's more gravity's domain. Planets in our solar system, like Venus, have a weak magnetosphere, but still possess an atmosphere. The question also remains if any underground aquifers exist, as groundwater wouldn't evaporate like on the surface. Bethesda had a couple of options here, and yet they chose the most predictable one, with Earth simply being a wasteland. Secondly, with the expeditious exodus from a dangerous Earth, you'd imagine a lot more would be left of human civilization than a singular skyscraper. This feels almost disrespectful to the player, as Bethesda couldn't be bothered putting enough effort into our literal home planet to add sun-bleached cities, towns, or even the metal shells of cars long rusted. Humans are one of the most pervasive species on the planet, and some of the most adorned with items that would inevitably turn into artifacts. And lastly, I had the unfortunate idea to delve into the explanation this game uses as to why the grav drives impacted Earth so poorly, and in doing so found a detailed story of its creation. It was first created in the year 2138 as a flawed proof of concept. It underwent extensive testing and development for over 65 years, ending in the year 2203. During this time, it was a known issue that it destabilized Earth's magnetosphere, and the people testing it weren't even on Earth's surface when it was being used. They were on the moon, over 230,000 miles away from the Earth. We are expected to believe that during those 65 years, nobody gave the suggestion to stop. It's never hinted that Earth was in peril prior to this, so it's entirely from stupidity that this was allowed to happen. And conveniently, the grav drive was perfected right as Earth entered its cataclysmic state. These details coalesce in an ultimately drab and unimaginative fate for Earth. It ends up looking like every other planet or moon you land on, just rocks and sand. There are more details I could cover about the slipshod storytelling, environments, or the general experience of playing this game. I have a rather long catalog of things that irked me as I played, but through seeing the lackluster and uninspired doom they brought to our planet, it made it clear that this is all the game is capable of: mediocrity. Time and time again, Bethesda chose the most uninspired and basic approach to every aspect that you interact with. These videos are supposed to be about learning to appreciate games by taking your time and truly absorbing what the developers left you to find. But Starfield has nothing of note, nothing special, nothing substantial to it. Quite often, the more you think about this game, the worse it becomes. So to prevent further complaining, I think I'm going to leave it here. And with that chipper ending, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.